In this video, I'm going to show you how I built my teapot. I started with the base of the teapot by scoring to make sure that the walls would stay attached. In order to build the slab wall, I used this beveling tool to create a 45-degree angle on the edges of the slab. That way, when they overlap, it won't create a hump. That's something that my students struggled with when creating their cylinders on a previous project. I like to apply slip with this brush because it allows me to get an even coating of slip. I also went ahead and scored and slipped both edges of the slab as well as the top and bottom so that all of those sides would be nice and rough to make sure that the joints stayed together. Here you can see how the beveled edge helps create a smooth surface when attaching the two sides of the slab. And I just kind of smoothed everything out, making sure it was stuck down well and lined up correctly with the base of this teapot. In order to create all these pieces, I used templates, including 2 paper plates, one cut slightly smaller than the other one, and then a template for the spout, as well as a long strip of paper that would help me make sure that my side walls were the right size. As you can see, there's some slight texture on the walls of my slab. Some of those are going to get smoothed out, but they just serve as a background for the detail work that I'll be adding later on in the next video. And I applied these with a combination of texture tools, including a texture mat and a texture roller. I'm now creating a coil that will go on the inside edge of the bottom of the teapot, and then I'm going to use this to help make sure that it is smooth completely between the side of the side wall of the teapot and the bottom of the teapot. I want to make sure that I'm scoring all around the edges of my coil because I'm not sure which sides will end up touching the edges of the teapot. All right, from this angle where I've turned my teapot upside down, you can see that I've tried to smooth all the surface there where the two pieces are attached, and I've also tried to create some roundness to the vessel. So the bottom of the teapot actually has some roundness, and then so do the sides of the teapot. So I'm letting this get leather hard before I turn it over. Here is my piece of the spout that I cut out. So it is starting to get a little too hard, so I'm going to go ahead and put this together so that it will be ready to attach to my teapot as well. And you can see that I have this nice texture that I've added again to my teapot, and I'm just letting that roundness continue to get leather hard before I move on. Now, if you take a closer look at this spout piece, you can see it's kind of long. I made it extra long so I can decide as I'm looking at the size of the teapot how short or how long the spout should be. So this is probably a little longer than I'll keep it, but once I put it together, I can trim the spout. I'm going to get ready to attach the top of my teapot, and I'll cut the lid out of this piece. You'll see a hole where the lid will actually sit. So I'm scoring the top of my teapot just like I did the base of my teapot. And I'm also going to be adding a coil around it. That coil is going to help me get the lid properly placed. It'll create a little bit of thickness for the top of the teapot to sit, and then also give me some extra clay that I can use for blending. So I'm just rolling this coil out just like I did the one that went at the bottom of the teapot, and trying to get a relatively even thickness, but it's okay if it's not perfect because, again, it's just for smoothing in the top lid. All right, and here I'm going to add the slip to the top of the lid here so that I can make sure that everything stays nice and stuck. I'm being pretty generous with this because I've let the teapot sit long enough that I don't have to worry about it getting too soggy. Remember to score the top and bottom of the coil so that it is sure to adhere to whichever surface it's attached to. All right, I'm just blending in this top coil before I actually attach the slab that will make the top of the teapot. So just making sure that it's nice and attached, that it's going to stay blended into the base of the teapot. You'll notice I'm kind of cupping the teapot as I go to make sure that I don't deform the walls that I tried to create this roundness for. I want to make sure that they stay kind of even. I'm going to go ahead and score this top of the coil and top of this wall before I attach the actual top of the teapot just one more time, just to be sure everything is nice and roughened up. Now here is the top of the teapot. You can see that I've left it on this bowl. I'm trying to get the roundness again to the teapot, so I let it sit there while it was getting leather hard. And I'm going to go ahead and score the edges before attaching it to the teapot. Adding some slip now to the underside of the teapot top before I put it onto the base. All right, there's that hole, and I'm going to smooth it as best as I can. That extra coil I added is really helping right now because I can't see the inside of my teapot to make sure that I am getting it perfectly smoothed. I'm also smoothing out the edge of the teapot on the outside. This is different from the main video that I watched this week where they left that as kind of a detail, but I don't want it to distract from my coral reef design, so I'm going to get it nice and blended in. And I think that'll also just help make sure that it's a stronger attachment since I can't see the inside. I'm holding the inside of the lid as I do this to make sure, again, that it doesn't get deformed. I left it on that bowl to get the roundness, and I don't want to just push it flat or possibly even crack the piece as it's starting to get drier. It takes some effort to blend these two pieces together since they have been slowly drying out for the stiffness. And of course that's going to degrade some of the texture that I put into the teapot, but I can always add that back in later if I need it, and that texture is just a background for my actual coral reef anyways. Wanted to make it kind of reminiscent of waves moving in the background and obscuring the scene beyond what's in front of you. Starting to get everything smoothed out, and as I do that I'm going in and putting in some of the textures a little bit. I'm using a combination of a brayer roller that's actually meant for printmaking since I didn't have one specifically for clay, and then also the texture roller that I used initially to put in one of the textures, and I'm adding that onto there. I also used the mat a little bit to press in here just to kind of make everything similar in textures, again trying to make it look like something is far away in the distance through the waves. I smoothed out all of the surfaces around where the lid is going to go, made sure it had a nice form to it still. It's really starting to look round, and when I put this lid inside I'm going to make sure that it fits inside of the hole just like I did with my vase that I made earlier. All right, so I've begun building my lid by adding a circle underneath the piece that I had cut out. You can see how I've stretched it a little bit to be slightly larger than the hole, and then the circle that fits directly inside of it. I did eventually go in and carve some of the weight out of the lid because once I had all the decoration on, it really started to get kind of heavy. So now I'm going to figure out where the spout's going to go. So I'm lining it up, kind of seeing about where I want it. I'm going to make sure to have the teapot spout at an angle so that the liquid wouldn't pour out if it was being used. And then once I have that there, I'm going to kind of mark where I want the teapot to go so that I can score and slip around it. So this looks like a pretty good angle, but I'm going to actually take a little bit more length off of the spout before I attach it. on top of the teapot lid, there's going to be a tentacle around it, and then there'll also be a tentacle going around the spout. The handle will also be a tentacle. Around the edges of the teapot, I'm going to have all kinds of coral reef. I'm using this scooping tool to create holes for the liquid to pour out of. There's two options. One is to just carve a giant hole, and then one is to do these little smaller holes. But I think the smaller holes will help to control the amount of liquid coming out. And since the teapot ended up being rather large, I think that will be helpful. So I'm just doing some extra marking to make sure that when I add the scoring to the surrounding areas, I put it in the right place, and then also making sure to see if I need any more holes. It looks like I have room for a few more holes, so I'm going to go ahead and add those really quickly before I attach the spout. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but this tool has a curve to it. It's not a full circle, it's like a half circle. So I'm just doing a little twirling motion to make the roundness, and then reaching inside to make sure that I've gotten all the clay removed. Now I'm going to score around these holes and add some slip. It's probably going to be a good idea to use a coil again around it, like I did when I was attaching my top of my teapot, so that I can get it nicely smoothed in, since I can't reach inside on the inside of the spout in order to smooth the inside of the spout. It's really important that the outside of the spout has a really good connection. So I made the coil slightly larger than the outside of the spout, since I was smoothing the coil completely on the outside of the spout, and then I'm just adding some slip to the spout with my brush, and then placing it. I'm checking the placement of the spout to make sure it's not at a weird angle, and that it's perfect, it's straight up and down. So it seems to be a slight angle here, so I'm going to try to make some adjustments before actually smoothing the coil in. So it's important to look at it from different angles, because sometimes the eyes play a trick on you. I noticed that I seem to be overcorrecting it a lot as I was trying to fix it. So generously applying the slip again, these pieces are pretty hard by now, so I don't have to worry about the moisture level as far as getting it too soft, but I want to make sure that I can easily blend in the clay and that the attachment will stay once it's dry. Using the round edge of this blending tool so that I can get the piece fully smooth together. All right, I'm just going to finish smoothing the clay around the spout, check on all my details, and make sure everything is ready to go. I'm going to let it sit a little bit, make sure all the pieces are attached correctly, and then I'll start adding the details. In the next video, I'll include how I'm going to add the handle for the teapot using a coil that looks like a tentacle, adding a tentacle around the spout and on the lid, and then how I'm going to add the coral reef design around the teapot. I'm checking inside my spout to make sure that I can see the holes through the spout and it's placed correctly. The coil really helped me to get that on correctly. The next video will show all of the detail work, and including the handle, since that is kind of part of the coral reef design.